and he's able to navigate difficulties with guidance because he has Allah in his life. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is everlasting and all sustaining. Al-Hayyul Qayyum la ta'khudhuhu sinatun wa la nawm. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is everlasting, and sleep nor tiredness does not affect Allah. And if you have a relationship with the everlasting, وَتَوَكَّلْ عَلَى الْحَيِّ الَّذِي لَا يَمُوتُ, if you have a relationship and if you have true reliance and true faith in the everlasting and all sustaining, you can never go wrong because Allah will never let you down. But human beings and people will let you down. So we remind ourselves on this blessed day of Jum'ah to have a relationship with Allah. That's what it is to have taqwa. What it is to have taqwa is basically to have a relationship with your Creator. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He reminds us in the Quran multiple times about this important notion of taqwa. He says after أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون. O you who have believed, fear Allah as He is meant to be feared, and do not die except in a state of submission to Him, and do not die except in a state of Islam. And He tells us in the last page of Surah Al-Hashr, يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله ولتنظر نفس ما قدمت لغد واتقوا الله إن الله خبير بما تعملون. O you who have believed, fear Allah and let each person see what he has prepared for tomorrow. Let each person see what he has put forth for the day of judgment. And fear Allah, indeed Allah is all aware of what you do. Indeed Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He knows everything. Allah, He tells us to be aware of Him and to prepare for tomorrow. The mu'min is in a constant state of preparation because he's always preparing for tomorrow. The mu'min is always preparing for the day he meets Allah. That's what tomorrow means here. Tomorrow means Yawm al-Qiyamah. And then Allah, He says, and fear Allah. And He reminds us. And then He says, Allah knows everything that you do. Allah is all aware of everything. And then Allah, He tells us in the last page of Surah Al-Ahzab, He says, يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وقولوا قولا سديدا يصلح لكم أعمالكم ويغفر لكم ذنوبكم ومن يطع الله ورسوله فقد فاز فوزا عظيما. O you who have believed, fear Allah and say what is upright. Fear Allah and speak the truth. Say a just word, speak an upright word. So when you fear Allah and you have Allah in your life and you're truthful and you're a person of justice and you speak the truth, you receive two bounties from Allah. يغفر لكم ذنوبكم يصلح لكم أعمالكم ويغفر لكم ذنوبكم. When you're an upright individual and you speak the truth and you have sincerity in your heart, the sincerity portrays on your tongue, and the outcome of that sincerity is Allah rectifying your affairs for you. يصلح لكم أعمالكم. Allah, He grants you the ability to do good in your life, and Allah, He grants you the ability to refrain from haram, and Allah grants you the ability to come to the masjid, and Allah grants you the ability to live in the boundaries of the Sharia. And then He also forgives you of your shortcomings and your sins, the outcome of being sincere and truthful. And we're all in debt to Allah, and we all are in dire need of our sins to be forgiven and overlooked by the most merciful Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim. My dear brothers and sisters, I would like to speak to you all today about a very prominent figure in the history of the Muslims. We see that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He blessed the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam with the greatest people to ever walk the face of the earth after the prophets and messengers. It is agreed upon that the greatest generation of human beings to ever live was the generation of the Sahaba. Of course, so when we say this, that means that the greatest men, Allah, He granted the Prophet the greatest men to surround him. The bravest men and the most courageous men and the most generous men. The Sahaba of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam were the greatest men to walk the face of the earth, and they aided the Prophet, and they gave aid to the religion of Islam, and they partook in many battles such as Badr and Uhud and Khandaq and Khaybar and Qaynaqa and Tabuk, etc. But the prophets and messengers are the greatest people to ever walk the face of the earth. And after the companions came the Tabi'un, who were also a great generation, and then their followers. That's why we always ask Allah to grant us the ways of the pious predecessors, the Salaf al-Salih. We always want to be like the Salaf al-Salih, inshaAllah, because of their goodness and their piety. And the Sahaba would see something small, maybe in our eyes as a big sin. And then it moves down, after generation, we start to see big sins as something small. But at their time, they would see something that was maybe not such a big sin, a humongous sin. That's due to their piety and their taqwa and their closeness to Allah. But I would like to speak to you all about someone who came much after the Sahaba. He came about 600 years after the companions of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, but he was like one of the companions. And we realize something in life. And that's that you do not have to be physically big to be big. You don't have to be physically large to be large. You don't have to be a giant to have a giant impact. Because some of the smallest and shortest people were some of the greatest people. So greatness is not defined by physical might and strength, because Goliath was humongous and he was overtaken by David, who was not humongous, with a rock. What we define as mighty and powerful and having a great impact is your actions and what your actions perform in this small time you lived, and the legacy that you leave behind, such as Imam al-Nawawi. Imam al-Nawawi, he lived for 44 years and he left behind a massive legacy. And Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, the great companion of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, one time he was climbing a tree and he was small in stature. And the companions began to laugh. The companions of the Prophet began to laugh at Abdullah ibn Mas'ud. So the Prophet said, "What are you laughing at?" And they said, "Look at his shins. They're so small, they're like the shins of a little bird." And the Prophet ﷺ was bothered by this statement, because they don't know who Abdullah ibn Mas'ud is in the eyes of Allah. But the Prophet knows. So the Prophet wanted to teach a concept here. Because maybe Arab at that time, they think that you have to be big and strong to have a lot of significance. The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, he went and he wanted to teach them something important here, right now. He said to them, if the two shins of Abdullah ibn Mas'ud were taken and placed on the scale on Yawm al-Qiyamah, and then the mountain of Uhud was taken, and then we bring the mountain of Uhud and we take it and we put it on the other side of the scale, the shin of Abdullah ibn Mas'ud will be heavier on the scale than the mountain of Uhud. Yani, who do you think this guy is? You think because he's small and skinny he doesn't have a lot of significance? His significance in the eyes of Allah is great. What we have to understand from this is that it does not matter what your status is in front of people. It does not matter. What matters is what your status is with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Attaining a high status with Allah is through pious, noble actions, taqwa, and doing good things. Having an impact, leaving a legacy, leaving a good trace, leaving a good footprint. That's what it means. Abdullah bin Mas'ud, of course, he left a good footprint. He was a great companion. Later on, Sayyidina Umar ibn al-Khattab, he assumes the Khilafah and he sends Abdullah ibn Mas'ud to Kufa, and he tells the people of Kufa, أَنَا آثَرْتُكُمْ عَلَى نَفْسِي بِإِبْنِ مَسْعُودٍ. And he goes, I preferred all of you over my own self by sending you Abdullah ibn Mas'ud. Who is Abdullah ibn Mas'ud? He sent him to Kufa so he could teach the people of Kufa fiqh and tafsir and hadith. And the people of Kufa took from Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, and his greatest student was Alqamat ibn Qais, and his greatest student was Ibrahim al-Nakha'i, and his greatest student was Hamad ibn Abi Sulaiman, and Hamad ibn Abi Sulaiman's greatest student was someone called Al-Nu'man ibn Thabit Abu Hanifa al-Nu'man al-Imam al-A'zam. Imam Abu Hanifa came from the madrasa of Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, and he was born. Today I want to speak to you all about someone that left a great legacy as well. And every single Muslim that came after this individual is in debt to him. Again, every single Muslim that came after this individual is in debt to him for his service and what he gave the Muslims and what he did for the Muslim Ummah. That's Salahuddin al-Ayyubi. Salahuddin al-Ayyubi was a great person. He was a righteous person, and he was a great leader, and he was smart, and he was a politician. He was also a politician, because sometimes you have to use politics, sometimes you have to partake in politics, sometimes you have to go out and vote to make a change in a system. Sometimes you have to play the game. Salahuddin played the game well. Sometimes you have to play the game stronger than the other side plays the game. Sometimes you have to follow the way that things work in society in order to take over. Salahuddin eventually took over because he played politics well, because he was smart, but he was also a very righteous man. Salahuddin al-Ayyubi is not his actual name, but that's what everyone knows him for. His actual name was Yusuf. Salahuddin's actual name was Yusuf ibn Ayyub. That's why he's al-Ayyubi. His father was Najmuddin Ayyub. They were from a place called Takrit. There's another person that passed away recently that was also from Takrit, one of the leaders of Iraq. Takrit is north of Baghdad. It's about 2.5 hours north with a car. And Takrit is the beginning of the Kurdish areas of Iraq. Iraq, northern Iraq, has something called Kurdish people. Kurdish people are ethnically Kurdish. Kurdish people are found in Iran. Kurdish people are found in Turkey, Kurdish people are found in Syria, and Kurdish people are found in great numbers in northern Iraq. They speak a language called Kurdish, and their language is vast and it has many different dialects. So Salahuddin was ethnically Kurdish. Salahuddin was ethnically Kurdish, and he was born in Tikrit, and he was born at the time of the Seljuk Empire. And the Seljuk Empire was a Turkic empire inside of the Dawla al-Abbasiyya. It was an empire inside of a greater empire. The Khilafah al-Abbasiyya was weak at the time. So due to the weakness, other empires emerged inside of the massive Khilafah, and they gave bay'ah to the Khilafah, so they used to give their taxes, and they used to answer to the Khilafah ultimately, but they were like many states inside of a massive state of the Khilafah. So Salahuddin was born in Tikrit, and he was taken as a young boy to Mosul, where he was later soon moved to Ba'labak, because the leader at the time of the Seljuk Empire was Ahmad ad-Din al-Zingi, or in Arabic al-Zinki. Ahmad ad-Din al-Zinki passed away. Upon the passing of Ahmad ad-Din al-Zinki, his son assumed authority, who was Nur ad-Din al-Zinki, or Nur ad-Din Zingi, as they say in English, Zingi. Nur ad-Din al-Zinki, we said, was ethnically Turkic, meaning he was from Central Asia, meaning he was not an Arab. He was the leader of the Seljuk Empire at this timing, and he was a great man as well. And Nur ad-Din al-Zinki, he had something called a hem that he slept with every night. He had something that was bothering him. He had something that was bothering him every single night, and that was the fact that Bayt al-Maqdis, Jerusalem, Al-Aqsa, had been overtaken by the Crusaders 80 years prior to him assuming his authority. So the Holy Land of Bayt al-Maqdis, Jerusalem, Palestine, and the surrounding areas of the Levant, Asham, were occupied territories by the Crusaders. That same land today, that same exact land today, is occupied by a different Crusader, by a Zionist entity. They occupy that land. At that time, it was the Christian Crusaders that occupied the Holy Lands. They had a couple of crusades: the first crusade, the second crusade, the third crusade. The first crusade was a very bloody, unjust crusade. They say that when the Crusaders entered Jerusalem, the blood was knee deep, like knee high, in the Masjid of Sayyidina Umar ibn al-Khattab. The Masjid of Sayyidina Umar al-Khattab is one of the three masjids that you find in the Al-Aqsa compound. You find Qubbat al-Sakhra, and you find Al-Aqsa, and you find Masjid Umar ibn al-Khattab, named after Sayyidina Umar ibn al-Khattab, because he liberated Jerusalem first when he took power. And when he liberated Jerusalem, he entered the gates of Jerusalem walking on his 2 feet. So the people in Jerusalem didn't even know he was the Khalifa. And he went and he prayed 2 rak'ahs in this area, where they later built a masjid called Masjid Umar ibn al-Khattab. It's a small masjid. They say that the blood was up to the knee, the blood of the Muslims, when the Crusaders came in. So Nur ad-Din al-Zinki was bothered by this, and he was planning to liberate Masjid al-Aqsa. Salahuddin was a young boy. Salahuddin's actual name was Yusuf. So Salahuddin was then sent with his uncle. He was then sent with his uncle to a place called Ba'labak. So the father of Salahuddin and the uncle of Salahuddin all moved to a place called Ba'labak that was conquered by Nur ad-Din al-Zinki. He opened that city. So Ba'labak and Damascus were now under the Zinki Empire. When Salahuddin was about 20 years old, there was a problem in Egypt. There was a civil war taking place in Egypt under the Fatimids. The Fatimids were Ismaili Shia. They were Agha Khani Ismaili Shia. They are a deviant sect of Shi'ism. Of course, as Sunnis, we say all Shi'is have deviancy in them. But not all Shi'is are non-Muslim. The majority of Shi'as are not non-Muslim. Yes, Shi'as have different beliefs than us in Aqidah. The majority of Shi'as are not non-Muslims. The majority of Shia are Muslim. They entered the fold of Islam. Since the beginning of Islam, there were Shia and there were Mu'tazila and there were Khawarij. They were still Muslims. They were still Muslims. They did not leave the fold of Islam. So the majority of Shia today in Iran and Lebanon and Iraq and parts of Yemen and parts of Afghanistan and parts of Pakistan, the majority of Shia today are Ithna Ashari and they're Ja'fari and they are Muslim. Yes, they have deviant beliefs, but they're Muslim. Ismailis, their beliefs were a little too deviant. So even the Shia don't consider them to be Muslim. But Ismailis are many sects. The majority of Ismailis are not considered Muslims, and the Fatimids were on that degree of extreme tashayyu'ah. They overtook and they were in charge of Egypt for 280 years. They built Masjid al-Azhar in order to make it a strong Shia Manara of Islam. To make a story short, the Shia Fatimid Empire in Egypt was having problems. They were having an internal conflict due to Hub al-Dunya. It doesn't matter Shi'i, Sunni, whatever, it's always hubb dunya that causes problems. The love for dunya is what always causes friction and problems. So the other Shia Fatimids of Egypt were using the Crusaders to stage a mutiny against the Fatimid ruler. The Fatimid, they wanted to take him over. So they were using the kuffar to go against their own person because they wanted the leadership. So the Fatimid ruler, he called out to the Abbasi Khalifa for help. He called out to the Abbasi Khalifa for help, so he called out to Nuruddin al-Zinki, the Seljuk Empire, the Seljuk Emperor. And the Seljuk Emperor, Nuruddin al-Zinki, was very smart. And he knows very well, if he goes to help this guy out, that's a way to take over. That's a way to give Egypt back to the Abbasi Khilafah. So he sent Salahuddin, a young man, with his uncle, Shirokh. His uncle was Asaduddin. Asaduddin means the lion of the religion. Shirokh was a commander of the commanders of the Seljuk Empire. He was also Kurdish origin, mercenary. He was a mercenary, a trained warrior. Salahuddin was raised at a young age in the city of Ba'labak. He was raised on Islam, on fiqh Shafi'i, on tasawwuf, on Quran, Hafid Quran. Used to read the books of Abdul Qadir al-Jailani, al-Hanbali, right? He was raised a talib al-ilm. So when Salahuddin and his uncle Shirokh got the letter from the emperor, Nuruddin al-Zinki, to go to Egypt, to take care of Egypt with an army and to help the Fatimid ruler of Egypt, Salahuddin didn't want anything to do with politics at this time. He didn't want to fight a war and die. He wanted to study fiqh and hadith because he was loving it. He was a talib al-ilm. But sometimes in life, a scenario happens to you and you may think it's not in your best interest, but it turns out to be for your best interest. And sometimes something happens and you think that it is for your best interest and you realize it's not. وعسى أن تكرهوا شيئا وهو خير لكم وعسى أن تحبوا شيئا وهو شر لكم والله يعلم وأنتم لا تعلمون. Ultimately, Allah is all aware of what happens and Allah knows everything and you don't know nothing. Our understanding and our minds are limited, they're finite, and Allah is infinite. So Salahuddin goes to Fatimid Egypt with an army, with his uncle, and they aid the emperor of Egypt, the Fatimid Shi'i guy. They help him out and they kick out the people that were staging the mutiny. They stop it. And now Egypt has power again. And now the Fatimid emperor, the Fatimid Shi'i emperor, he takes Salahuddin as his closest wazir. He takes him as a close, intimate friend. Because Salahuddin is great. He's young and he's strong. Military genius, Hafid Quran, Hafid Kutub al-Fiqh al-Shafi'i. He's a great guy. Salahuddin is amazing. So Salahuddin now uses politics to his advantage. He knows that he's in a Shi'i empire. Now in today's world, if we said something about a Sunni guy going to a Shi'i country, God forbid he goes to a Shi'i country, we'll raise hell and heaven on him. No, but Salahuddin was smart. He went and he remained there for a couple of years and they kept having internal conflicts in the Fatimid dynasty until he found an opportunity to assume position, to take over after the emperor of the Fatimids. And Salahuddin al-Ayyubi became the leader, the president of a Shi'i country. It's like a Sunni guy going to Iran and becoming the Ayatollah there. He became the president there. Salahuddin went and took over Fatimid Egypt. He was running the Fatimid Empire as a Sunni Kurdish guy from Tikrit. Then after he did that, he's a political genius. After he did that, he goes and he makes the Fatimid dynasty give bay'ah to the Abbasid Khilafah. So he goes and they give bay'ah and Egypt becomes under the Khilafat al-Abbasiyah. Egypt becomes Sunni again. And Salahuddin changes Al-Azhar from Shi'i Masjid to Sunni Masjid. And Salahuddin changes the adhan in Egypt from Hayya ala al-Khair al-Amal, the Shi'i adhan, to Sunni adhan. And Egypt becomes Sunni again and the Fatimids go away. And Salahuddin becomes in charge and he's running over Egypt. Then political strife happens in Damascus. Who was in Damascus? Nuruddin al-Zinki, right? The one who raised Salahuddin. Nuruddin al-Zinki, the emperor of the Seljuk Empire. He passes away and his son becomes the leader. His son Al-Malik al-Salih, his son, the son of Nuruddin al-Zinki, is a young boy. So there's a lot of fight over who's going to assume the position. So Salahuddin is called by the Seljuks. He's called back from Egypt to come to Damascus. He's called to come to Damascus to take over the Seljuk Empire. Salahuddin goes to Damascus and he takes over and he basically unites the Ummah because there's too much friction and problems. And we can't have friction and problems and a lack of unity. If the brothers could please move up, if the brothers could all move up, please, and the brothers outside can please come sit down inside, please. There's a lot of spaces, they're going to move up now. So Salahuddin, he unites the Ummah in Damascus and he becomes the leader and he starts and he establishes the Dawla al-Ayyubiyya, the Ayyubid dynasty. The Ayyubid dynasty is named after Salahuddin al-Ayyubi. His dad's name was Ayyub. So he establishes the Ayyubid dynasty. It's a very powerful dynasty. He brings all the Muslims together. He brings all the Muslims together. What is the ultimate goal right now of Salahuddin? The ultimate goal is to liberate Masjid al-Aqsa. He's trying to make the Muslims strong and united so they can overcome and overtake Jerusalem. If the Muslims of today, 1 out of every 4 people is Muslim today, 1 out of every 4, and our brothers and sisters in Gaza have been slaughtered for over a year and we can't do nothing because the neighboring countries are all hypocritical countries with hypocritical leaders. Every single country that borders the apartheid state is a Muslim country. Not one person can send a military tank from their country. Hubb dunya, disunity. 2 things that are the demise of Muslims all the time. Love of dunya, not wanting to die, not wanting the interest of the Muslims. Loving your own self, loving your own air condition, loving your own woman, loving your own alcohol, loving your own meat, loving your own steak, loving your own comfort over the interest of the Muslims. Number 1 reason. Yeah, we see that today as well. Salahuddin didn't have Hubb al-Dunya, he had Hubb al-Ummah, and he had Hubb al-Aqsa, because Aqsa, Hubb al-Aqsa, wa Hubb Bayt al-Maqdis, wa Hubb Palestine is min al-Iman. If you're a Muslim, you have to love it. It's the Holy Land. It's where the Prophet ascended. He made the Muslims strong by uniting them. And then one of the Crusaders made a big mistake. Of course, they had a peace treaty with the Crusaders. One of the Crusaders, he was a renegade. You know what a renegade means? He was a tyrannical person. He was a bad person. He was even imprisoned by his own people for war crimes. He was imprisoned by his fellow Crusaders for war crimes for 15 years. After being released from their political prison, the Crusaders, this man, his name was Reginald of Chantalon. He was released from prison, and he goes and he marries one of the princesses so he could be given empire. That's how you do it. Back then you marry a princess and she gives you the emperor that her dad owned. So he gets in charge, this evil guy, Reginald. He gets in charge of a place called Karak. Karak is in Urdun. Karak is in Jordan. Karak is an area in Jordan that caravans pass through often. Muslim caravans pass through often. It's a desert area, okay? As he's in charge of Karak, a Muslim caravan passes through and he slaughters the Muslim caravan, going against the peace treaty he has with Salahuddin. It was said that when he attacked the caravan, this evil person, he mocked the Muslims as he was slaughtering them by telling them, go ask your Prophet to come out of his grave and help you. Go ask your Prophet ﷺ to come intercede for you. And then he went on to massacre the entire caravan. This was a complete violation of the truce that he had with the Muslims, which motivated Salahuddin to finally use this incident as an opportunity to go and conquer Jerusalem and overtake Masjid al-Aqsa. So Salahuddin, in response to this evil act, he gathers 20 to 30,000 Muslim soldiers and he goes to a place called Tabriz. Tabriz is in northern Palestine, or we call it northern Arad al-Muhtalla today, northern Israel they call it, the state of Israel, northern occupied territories. There's a sea there. You know what a sea? A sea is a massive body of water, like a lake. It's called the Sea of Galilee. Spring water, natural water, lake. The Lake of Tabriz. Salahuddin goes with his 30,000 army and they kick out the Crusaders from that town of Tabriz and they overcome it and they prepare to move south, because south of Nazareth, Nasra, south of Tabriz is Nasra, and south of Nasra is eventually Bayt al-Maqdis. That's the ultimate goal. So he kicks out the Crusaders. The Crusaders hear about this. They send the army back to attack Salahuddin. This is what we call the Battle of Hattin. The Battle of Hattin is what ultimately led to the liberation of Masjid al-Aqsa, this battle. Salahuddin now has behind him, he has the Sea of Galilee. The Lake of Tabriz is behind him, so they're drinking and they have water for their riding beasts and they have water to drink and they can remain now. They're good. They come now, the Crusaders come to attack him, so they come to a place called Hattin. They want to come to Hattin because there's natural springs there as well. So there's water source. The Muslims do not allow them. The Muslims do not grant them the ability. The Muslims do not grant them comfort to come and establish a camp there. So the Crusaders responded by sending an army of their own, and they attempted to settle by the springs of Hattin, which is right in front of the Lake of Tabriz. The Muslim army blocked them, and they blocked all access to water. So they had no water, the Crusaders. Then the hot weather took a large toll on the Crusaders, and when the Crusader army made a camp, the Muslims began to surround them and attack them with arrows and catapults, and they were making large chanting noises, and they set fire. The Muslims set fire to all the surrounding area, the dry grass, and the Crusaders were not able to defeat the Muslims, and the Muslims won in an outstanding victory in the Battle of Hattin, and the Crusaders ran away, and the Muslims captured the 5 Ra'us al-Kufr, the 5 head Crusader leaders that were there. The Lord of Jerusalem was there, the King of Jerusalem was there. His name was Guy Lusignan, and the Reginald of Chantilon, this guy that we just talked about. All of these, the 5 main people that were leading the army. Salahuddin went and he was selected to personally execute them for their treason. So he executed all 5 of their leaders. But Salahuddin was a very just man. That's a just thing to do, because he went and massacred Muslims, these people. So Salahuddin went then, and they went straight down to Jerusalem. Him and his army, now they have motivation, they won, they killed the leaders of this army, they go straight down to Jerusalem, and they surrounded the gates of Jerusalem. They surrounded the gates of Jerusalem for one single week. And Salahuddin sent an envoy. He sent an envoy into Jerusalem to speak to the leaders of the Crusaders inside Jerusalem, to grant them the ability to forfeit, to grant them the ability to come out with a white flag, because Salahuddin doesn't want bloodshed in Al-Aqsa. Salahuddin doesn't want bloodshed in Al-Aqsa. Salahuddin doesn't want to spill blood in a holy land. They said no. Salahuddin went and he attacked. The fighting went on for a week until they ultimately forfeited. They forfeited under the condition that Salahuddin said, I'll give you all the ability to leave. We won't slaughter you all like you slaughtered us all. We will not slaughter all of you like you slaughtered all of us when you came and took our land. He said, I'll give you 40 days to pack up your stuff. 40 days is a lot of time. To pack up your stuff and leave. Each man has to pay a ransom. And this is normal in war. Ransom is normal. Each man has to pay 10 dinars. And each woman has to pay 5 dinars. And for each child, 2 dinars. Very small amount of money. A typical ransom was much more than this. And even those who did not have the ability to pay, Salahuddin forgave them and he exempt them. And all of those elderly, Salahuddin even paid for them if they didn't have money. For the elderly and the priests and everyone, he let them go. So ultimately, Salahuddin al-Ayyubi, he conquered Masjid al-Aqsa in Jerusalem due to his piety, due to his taqwa, due to the unison of the Muslims, due to the Muslims being united. That day, the conquest of Jerusalem, we are all in debt to him for this, happened on Friday, Yawm al-Jum'ah, the 27th from the blessed month of Rajab. What happened on the 27th of Rajab? Al-Isra wal-Mi'raj. The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ went in a miraculous night journey from Mecca to Al-Aqsa on a buraq, on a Pegasus, and he led the prophets and messengers in prayer in Masjid al-Aqsa on the 27th of Rajab on a Friday. Salahuddin al-Ayyubi, 600 years later, he liberates Masjid al-Aqsa in Jerusalem on the 27th of Rajab. The same exact day that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam led the prophets and messengers in prayers there in Al-Aqsa, Ibn Shaddad, the famous historian, he says it was the victory of all victories, and it was the joyful shouts of the Muslims screaming out, La ilaha illallah, wallahu akbar. They were happy after 90 years of occupation, after 90 years of injustice. After 90 years of injustice, the Muslims finally made adhan in Masjid al-Aqsa again, and they held the first Friday prayer right then and there when they entered the Jerusalem, because it was Yawm al-Jum'ah. They entered Jerusalem and they had a Yawm al-Jum'ah for the first time in 90 years. We ask Allah to grant us understanding and wisdom. We ask Allah to make many Salahuddin al-Ayyubis come from our ummah so we could ultimately liberate Masjid al-Aqsa. We ask Allah to grant us the ability to pray in a liberated Masjid al-Aqsa. وأقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم فاستغفروه. الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا وأوصي نفسي وإياكم بتقوى الله تعالى. My dear brothers and sisters, I remind myself and all of you to fear Allah and to be people of Allah and to establish the prayer. Salahuddin al-Ayyubi was a very pious man. He said, I have not performed a single congregational prayer alone for the past several years. Even during his illness, when he was on his deathbed, he refused to pray on his own. He wanted to pray Salat al-Jama'ah. This is a sign of Salah, sign of righteousness. He would call the Imam or the Shaykh to come to his quarters so he could pray Salat al-Jama'ah. As he was passing away, he called in a Shaykh to come read Quran on him. He was in the illness of death, Sakarat al-Maut. The Shaykh was reading the last final ayahs of Surah al-Hashr. هو الله الذي لا إله إلا هو عالم الغيب والشهادة الملك القدوس الرحمن الرحيم. He was reading the beautiful ayahs of Surah al-Hashr. As he was reading these ayahs, Salahuddin woke up and he said, Sadaqta la ilaha illallah. He said that you speak the truth, there is no God but Allah. And he passed away. He passed away at the age of 55 years old. Salahuddin al-Ayyubi was 55 years old, meaning he was a very young man when he passed away. But he left behind a profound legacy. The conclusion of the khutbah is, my dear brothers and sisters, your time in this dunya is short-lived. Your time in this dunya is short-lived. And perhaps you're already 55 years old. Look what one man did in 55 years. One man did in 55 years. He was a smart man. He was a religious man. When you're smart and religious and you're educated, you could go a long way. He was also physically strong. And he was a military man. In Islam calls and tells us as men to be military-minded, because Islam comes and teaches us to learn how to ride a horse, because the horse was the instrument that they used back then to go and fight. And it teaches us, Islam comes and says this from the Sunnah, to learn how to use a bow and arrow. In today's world, the bow and arrow is something else. I don't have to say it here, but you all know what that means. A man in Islam should have manly qualities to him, so he's able to do manly things. And that's what eventually if every Muslim was like this, inshallah, we wouldn't have as many problems as we did today. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless us with understanding. Inshallah, the voting is coming up, and I strongly emphasize and advise you all to vote. It's a difficult election because both candidates are, we can't talk about politics. Go out and vote for whoever you think is best, inshallah. Vote in order to make the party that is in charge regret their decision of allowing this genocide to be ongoing. ربنا ظلمنا أنفسنا وإن لم تغفر لنا وترحمنا لنكونن من الخاسرين. ربنا لا تزغ قلوبنا بعد إذ هديتنا وهب لنا من لدنك رحمة إنك أنت الوهاب. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. اللهم اغفر للمسلمين والمسلمات والمؤمنين والمؤمنات الأحياء منهم والأموات إنك سميع قريب مجيب الدعوات. إن الله تعالى يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون. فاذكروا الله يذكركم واشكروه يزدكم واستغفروه يغفر لكم وأقم الصلاة إن الصلاة تنهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر ولذكر الله أكبر والله يعلم ما تصنعون.
الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمد رسول الله أشهد أن محمد رسول الله. حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح. قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة. الله أكبر الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله
لا إله إلا الله وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. استقيموا واعتدلوا تراسوا. الله أكبر. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. والضحى والليل إذا سجى ما ودعك ربك وما قلى وللآخرة خير لك من الأولى ولسوف يعطيك ربك فترضى. ألم يجدك يتيما فآوى ووجدك ضالا فهدى ووجدك عائلا فأغنى. فأما اليتيم فلا تقهر وأما السائل فلا تنهر وأما بنعمة ربك فحدث. الله أكبر. سمع الله من حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. إذا جاء نصر الله والفتح ورأيت الناس يدخلون في دين الله أفواجا فسبح بحمد ربك واستغفره إنه كان توابا. الله أكبر. سمع الله من حمده. الله أكبر. Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Assalamu alaikum. Just a couple of announcements. Again, I remind you all to partake in the vote and try to do something political for the Muslims, inshallah. With that being said, we have classes Monday and Wednesday here at Masjid Younis. Monday night we have a tazkiyah class after Salat al-Isha. And on Wednesday night we have a tafsir class about Surah Yusuf at Masjid Younis with myself. So we ask you all to come join us in the classes if you're able to after Salat al-Isha, Mondays and Wednesdays. Please